Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor David Prozer of Kempsville Conservative Synagogue, Kehillat Bet HaMidrash in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this is our Torah portion for the Shabbat of Saturday, June 19th, corresponding to the Hebrew date of the 9th of Tammuz, 5781. We thank Rabbi Joseph Prauser, Rabbi Avram Kogan, Rabbi Matthew Berkowitz, Rabbi Brad Artson, and the United Synagogue Torah Spark series for their various teachings and publications on this week's Parsha. This Shabbat, we read the Parsha of Chukat in the book of Bamidbar. Chukat begins on page 880 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 652 of the Hertz. The Parsha opens with one of the most inscrutable passages in the Torah about the Para Aduma, the red heifer. The ashes of an entirely red cow are mixed with the other significantly red ingredients with which it is to be burned for use in a ritual that purifies someone who has been in contact with a corpse. In an ironic twist, the ashes which render the afflicted person pure render the officiating priest impure. It should be noted that a preoccupation with the dead was an ever-present part not only of ancient Egyptian theology, but also of daily life in Egypt. This ritual presented appears to be designed to distance people from excessive involvement with the dead. When the Israelites arrive at Kadesh, a series of significant events took place. Miriam dies and is buried. Immediately after her death, we learn that Israel is without water, the juxtaposition providing the impetus for the midrashic link between Miriam and the Israelites' miraculous access to water in the wilderness. The Israelites quarrel with Moshe about their potentially lethal lack of water. God tells Moshe and Aaron to equip themselves with Moshe's staff and then to order a rock to produce water for the Israelites. Moshe departed from these precise instructions, instead striking the rock twice. God responds to the prophetic breach of discipline harshly. Because they did not trust me enough to sanctify me in the sight of the Israelites, Moshe and Aaron are told that they will not be permitted to accompany the people into the promised land. Many commentators have struggled to explain why God would inflict a penalty this harsh on Moshe after all of his years of faithful service, leading the Israelites through some very difficult circumstances and challenges, and on Aharon, who seems to be an innocent bystander, while Moshe is the one who struck the rock to draw water from it rather than speaking to it. If we were to assume a moral God, none of the explanations offered by classical commentators seem to adequately justify this severe a reaction by God. The suggestion of the editors of the Eitz Chaim Chumash is one that should be explored further. They suggest that one might conclude that God's decree of death in the wilderness for Moshe and Aharon was not so much a punishment as a recognition that their time of leadership was over. Moshe and Aharon were the right leaders for the Exodus, for Sinai, for establishing the Mishkan. They were not the right people to lead a younger generation into battle. Rabbi Shmuel Avidor HaKohen explains, the ethical authority of a leader ceases the moment a leader begins to use violence and force. It is for this reason that Moshe is punished. The purpose is to demonstrate a vital lesson to future generations and future leaders. When it is possible to achieve one's goal through the spoken word and through explanation, it's forbidden to use coercion, force, or the power of the stick. I recommend that you read further the various commentaries in the Eitz Chaim Chumash as well as the Hertz to examine the various reflection on Moshe's action and God's reaction, as well as the other parts of this week's Parsha that rightly leave us with more questions than answers. Getting back to our narrative, while at Kadesh, Moshe appeals to the king of Edom to allow the Israelites to pass through his territory, invoking Israel's history of suffering and promising not to use any of Edom's natural resources. Edom responds tersely, saying, "You shall not pass," adding a threat of military enforcement to this refusal. When Edom refuses permission, the Israelites are forced to lengthen their journey because the Edomites were descendants of Yaakov's brother Esau, and the Israelites were reluctant to become embroiled in a dispute with distant relatives. Moshe, no doubt disappointed by Edom and grieving for Miriam, is further bereaved. Aharon dies on Mount Hor. Moshe transfers priestly leadership to his brother's son Eleazar, along with Aharon's vestments. The nation mourns its founding priest for 30 days. Following a battle in which the Israelites defeat the Canaanite king Arad at Hormah, the Israelites further complain about their hardships. God punishes the typically disgruntled Israelite community with lethally poisonous snakes. Moshe is instructed to construct a copper serpent which will be displayed on a pike. Afflicted Israelites are cured by looking at this metal snake. Citing a lost book of the wars of the Lord, the route through Transjordan is detailed, culminating in a battle against the Amorite king Sihon, whose land the victorious Israelites conquer. A similar victory and conquest followed the Israelites' battle with Og, king of Bashan. Our Parsha concludes with the wandering Israelites encamped on the steppes of Moab across the Jordan from Jericho. The Haftorah for this Shabbat is from the book of Judges, chapter 11, verses 1 to 33, beginning on page 909 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 664 of the Hertz. According to Dr. Hertz, the book of Judges describes the days of lawlessness in Israel, the frequent lapses into heathenism and immorality in neighboring nations, the dire calamities that followed, and the new judge and deliverer who would arise and save Israel from bondage and from the enemy. For 18 years, Israel had suffered under the cruel yoke of the Ammonites. The Haftorah opens with the search for a man capable of leading the people against the Ammonites. It tells the story of Jephthah, Yiftach in Hebrew, the rugged and ruthless warrior son of a harlot who was cast out of his father's house so that he wouldn't inherit any of his father's estate. Yet a noble patriot and tender-hearted father whose victory over the enemy was shadowed by a terrible sorrow. The Parsha gives the account of Israel's clash with the Amorites. The northern part of the Amorite kingdom had formerly belonged to Ammon. This forms the connection between the Parsha and the Haftorah. The elders of Gilead approached Jephthah to be their chief in the fight against Ammon. Even though he was previously cast out of Gilead, he agreed. After offering peace to the king of Ammon and being refused, he went to war against Israel's enemies and, giving full credit to God, defeated them. What makes Jephthah the memorable character he became is not the victory, but rather his vow to God. If thou wilt deliver the children of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatsoever comes from my door out of my house when I return in peace from Ammon, It shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. The narrative ends here, so we need to remember that the focus of this week's message was not Jephthah's personal irresponsible vow, but on national disputes and memory. Even so, we know where this leads, and it's hard not to tie in the sacrifice of his daughter. Under settled religious conditions, as would follow the lawless period of the Judges, this unhallowed vow would have been impossible. Even in that time, legend has it that the vow could have been annulled, but only the deep rivalry between Jephthah and the high priest kept them from approaching each other to do so. Jephthah was eventually punished by a horrible death. The condemnation of Jephthah's vow by the rabbis have been re-echoed in many tongues and many lands. 1,000 years later, Dante wrote, "Be strong to keep your vow, yet be not perverse. As Jephthah once blindly to execute a rash resolve, better a man should say, I have done wrong, than keeping an ill vow, he should do worse." Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, to like, and feel free to leave comments below. Shabbat Shalom.